The Construct Cast is made possible by viewers like you. Please visit us at commutationconstruct.locals.com. Memberships are free to start with coupon code CCFREE. Hello and welcome back to the Construct Cast. I am your host, James Darian, and it is a pleasure to be speaking with you today. So for today's topic, I wanted to discuss a bit about the ethos between the state and society. This is very multifaceted, so I'm going to try to talk about just a few things in this one. I'm sure I'm going to have more that are going to relate to this broader topic in general coming up more ConstructCast, but I want to just hop into it and discuss the bit of conflict of interest in businesses and politics, not just right now, but in general. So in the U.S., there is, not just through lobbying and stuff, but there's obviously business interest in the way political leaders initiate and engage what they do. That makes sense. That would happen in any country, any place. The government is enabled to make the rules and laws in countries, so it makes sense that, of course, businesses who are affected by those rules and laws want to be able to have some amount of influence in it. Though there is this trouble within. Well, I'm just going to focus on the U.S. right now, but there's this trouble within large national governments where they're able to, and this can even happen in localities, I suppose, too, but there's this ability to kind of really have a bit of a give and take between businesses and politicians that I've progressively grown more uncomfortable with as time has moved along. During the first day of the Biden administration, we saw Joe Biden make a deal with Amazon for distributing the vaccine. And initially, on first thought, that's like, oh, well, that's great. Amazon's this big corporation. They're able to, they have a big network that they can send out all these goods. But there's this question of, well, the government already has postal services that are meant to be capable of doing this. And there's a bunch of other free market services that do trade like this. It isn't just making a deal with Amazon kind of giving them a bit of an unfair advantage. It's giving them more business, just a monopolistic control potentially over the distribution of the vaccine. It isn't. I would like to consider this with other people. Like, to me, that sounds kind of scary because Amazon, I'm just using this as an example, but Amazon's already like the biggest country in the U.S., possibly definitely one of the biggest in the world, and if not the biggest, and they control web host. They have monopolies over web hosting services. They have probably the biggest. No, they definitely have the biggest online marketplace, to where people will just go onto Amazon and search for things as opposed to going on to individual company websites, or even instead of using search engines like Google or DuckDuckGo or Yahoo, they'll just go straight on Amazon and search for things that they want. So there's a lot of power that Amazon already has. They handle a lot of shipping throughout the U.S. already. And again, I'm just speaking in U.S. terms. So if you're a foreigner and Amazon's not that big of a presence in your country where you are, if you're not from the U.S., then this probably won't apply to you as much. But at least by U.S. standards, it's kind of freaky to me that a country that already a company that already controls so many aspects of the country is able to get control of yet another thing through a partnership with the government. And I've been thinking about this ever since the COVID thing started, when we had when President Trump was giving his I guess they were daily at the time, or nearly daily, updates about what the COVID team was doing and how they were responding and how they were making partnerships with all these private companies. It was starting to make me think, well, what are these private companies getting, these big private companies getting now that little companies aren't getting? And it made me realize, okay, and I started to see how things played out, actually. And I was just realizing, okay, so the only companies that are really able to work on developing these vaccines are going to end up being really big ones. Okay. Most small businesses across the country were forced to shut their doors, but a bunch of big box stores got to stay open, at least in like sections. It's like, okay, so now Trump was just talking about Walmart the other day. I don't know if he actually talked about Walmart, but like, just as an example, he talked about like Walmart being a really big help getting people the supplies they need to go through the pandemic. I'm just like, well, yeah, but that's because they're the only ones who are allowed to now. And now you're giving them more credit. You're giving them more recognition now. So what does that mean for all of their competitors? Like, it means you're tipping the scales. And I don't like this kind of involvement of where this, I don't necessarily mind a state being able to give access to companies within the nation to make deals and partnerships and work on developing things. But when it's so prevalent that the government is making deals with specific corporations, they're vocalizing it, they're giving more attention to it, they're basically doing marketing for these companies when they talk about these things, in addition to the guaranteed income they're getting, the protections they might be getting. Like a lot of the COVID vaccine companies have been given a lot of liability protection in regards to the development and deployment of their vaccines. That's really scary, because that means they're not really at risk of any kind of legal repercussions if something happens. If something severely wrong happens with their vaccines. So there's this weird dichotomy that I'm seeing with, maybe dichotomy isn't the right word, actually. Because dichotomy would be more of a duality, but there's this, maybe that's kind of right, but it's this weird relationship between the state and private business that has been really growing lately. And I'm not really comfortable with it, especially as private businesses are being forced to do so much. And even when they do so much to try to keep themselves afloat, they're still being hammered down or being told they're not allowed to do things, not allowed to operate. That's really freaky to me, because it feels like I've listened to people talk about how a lot of these, a lot of the services in the COVID relief have been seen as transfers of wealth to the wealthiest companies in the country, and it stuck out to me a lot as being true when I was looking at the stock market all last year, and it just kept going up, or kept being relatively stable, going up at points, going down at points, but generally it was stable and up over the past year. And I'm just like, why is it that when we are very clearly in a recession, the stock market is pretty much booming? And I think that's a question that's really worth asking. And it made me think, Well, we have career politicians that during the time when they are not in office, they are they're able to not just do things privately, like write books and stuff like that, but a lot of the times they're able to get jobs in media or in these big companies. They're able to become, a lot of them are lawyers and end up becoming leaders on boards for commissions that they end up creating. I know there was a big controversy in New York because New York created legislation around licensing for cryptocurrency transfer and this other legal stuff regarding that. And then at the end of the term of one of the politicians who helped make those laws, retired from his position in office, opened a private practice where he was like the preemptive legal support team, legal expert on this law that he made just a few months ago. So I think like that example in and of itself tells me there is something very wrong with the principles and ethos of which our political sphere is operating within. There's the ability to just move back and forth and to be able to create legislation and then get a job in a private sector where you're essentially doing all the legal work to handle the legislation, to handle the consumer side or the retail side of the legislation that you just made. I see that as being incredibly corrupt. Very easily corruptible. You have lobbyists going around doing stuff like the thing that I first thought when I saw the Amazon deal with a vaccine is so that one of the biggest companies supporting the $15 minimum wage is now working directly with the president. Well, why is it that one of the biggest corporations in the U.S. is wanting to promote a $15 minimum wage? Well, they created their own $15 minimum wage internally, and they started promoting it right after they did that. Immediately after they did that, they said, we're going to walk the walk and talk the talk. Well, okay, a lot of people like to say walk the walk, talk the talk. But when you think about it like this, it's just like, okay, so why would a big corporation want to promote this? And the answer is really because of competition. They were in a situation where they had to raise their wages. So now they're trying to force every other company that they're competing with to have to raise their wages too. And by doing that, they can really they can cause a lot of businesses to go out of business. There's so many, or worse yet, they'll force them to automate, which, well, I'm not going to necessarily say that's worse yet. At least a business owner is able to keep things going to some extent if they're able to automate. But the thing is, we're creating a situation where it's going to be almost impossible to get entry-level work experience. And I've noticed this becoming more and more difficult over time anyways for a lot of people. Like you can currently tons of people can get jobs at fast food places. But if suddenly a fast food company is having to pay all of their employees twice as much as they're currently paying them, and those employees, for the most part, that are getting that level of wage are just high schoolers who are just trying to get some spare money during the summer, maybe college students trying to earn a little extra cash. Well, suddenly they're having to pay twice as much. Those employees are now, they're not going to be able to hire as many employees, and they're going to have to so not only are they going to have to lay off some employees and not hire as much going forward, but the ones who are left are going to be expected to do a lot more work. And the thing is, if people aren't capable of delivering $15 an hour worth of work, then who's going to hire them? That's the thing. Like, who's going to be hiring people who aren't worth the amount that the government says everyone has to pay? And the government's saying this after making all these partnerships with these big corporations that are already able to afford to pay that. So a lot of these big corporations, they have so many people applying to them, they're able to make sure that they're hiring people who are worth that amount of money. But when you have entry-level people who have zero skills, you're not competing with 10,000 people to fill maybe like 200 or 100 jobs. Like, you're not having a 20-to-1 ratio of people trying to get the job to actually filling the role, or even maybe even more. Like, with Amazon so big, I could easily see dozens, if not hundreds, of people applying to each position, or more. A position that maybe they have one position open, and maybe they have 10,000 people applying to it. Well, yeah, the person that they're going to end up picking is going to be at the top percentage of those applying, typically, unless there's some like real narcissism or someone's really good at just lying their way through. They're going to be hiring someone who is worth that amount. But when you go down to a local level and you have maybe like 5 people in town applying for this one job, and maybe they're all young, they might be all kids, they might be college students, whatever, they might not be able to be, none of them may be like in that top percentage who are worth that amount. None of them might be there. And even if they have that skill level, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to really fulfill that value for the company, because of the role that they fill, necessarily because of the opportunity that the role has for them to fulfill that. If you are in a small coffee shop, small local coffee shop, there might just not be enough customers. Even if this person does a $15 an hour value of work, they may not actually have the customers to bring in the revenue to pay that amount out. Like, just because the town might be so small. So, when I see these things, I get very scared. I honestly, I worry about freedom in a lot of ways, because we're already living in a society where our assets can be taxed. And let's think about what that means. The government is able to charge you for the things that you own. What does that mean? It means you don't really own anything. Because if you ever can't afford the taxes on the things that you own, the government will come and take it from you. The government has the ability to come and take from you things that you have saved and earned and worked hard to get yourselves. And because you're not willing to pay them, if you're not able or willing to pay them for it, they're going to come take it. Whoa, you worked hard, you saved up, you bought this land from the state or from another owner. Well, guess what? You still owe rent. Your rent is just in tax. We are actually, in many ways, in a non-ownership, a non-property society in this way. And this is a new thing I've been conceptualizing lately, but that is a way I've been starting to think of things. And even if I'm not huge on the no income tax thing, just because I don't really invest myself too much into analyzing it. I don't really like income tax too much, because I don't think there's a good way to deliver it. But it becomes very arbitrary, and it becomes very based on inflation. So I have my questions about income tax, especially when the government is, not only are they taking money from you from income taxes, but they're inflating the currency, which again, that hurts small businesses in a lot of ways. And there is a conflict where, yeah, okay, so big businesses don't want to pay a lot of taxes, but because they're able to lobby and work so closely with the government, Amazon didn't pay any taxes the other year. And, well, they didn't pay any income taxes the other year because they have so many write-offs, so many expenses, all these other things. They're able to essentially make it so that they don't have to pay standard types of taxes that small businesses and small corporations are going to pay. If you run a small business, you are paying both sides of payroll tax. If you are trying to do something on your own, you're paying both sides of payroll tax. Whereas if you're an employee at a big corporation, well, the corporation pays half, but then you pay half out of your income. So it's actually, once a company gets to a certain point where it's like hiring employees, like technically, if you're a sole proprietor and you have a 100-person business, you're still paying both sides on your own income, but the income that's going into the company isn't necessarily just your income. Whereas if you're a one-man shop, the money going into the company is your money. So there's a bit of a difference there, and it really creates a situation that I'm uncomfortable with, and it's just another example of where I'm becoming more skeptical of how free the markets in the U.S. actually are, because I'm a big free marketeer, and I'm realizing that because of the relationship between businesses and government, because of the way government can make regulations and then go start their own businesses or go work for other businesses, that they're an expert on the regulation that affects that business, or they can make deals with those businesses to prop them up, and then maybe that business will just happen to hire them after, or it's a way, or they can make a law that will hurt competitors, make it harder for them to enter. What if there is legislation that completely regulates search engines, so that they have to tailor their results to make sure that nothing pornographic ever comes up? What if they did that, for example? Well, suddenly only the companies that can afford to do to set up a system and algorithms to exclude that kind of content like perfectly, otherwise they're held liable. Well, only the big companies are going to be able to, one, pay off those liability lawsuits of companies that already exist, or have really deep pockets backing them, or companies that are able to have the scale to be able to develop the algorithms efficiently, essentially. So there can be all these ways that they're able to work together, and it makes me a bit uncertain. I was thinking recently about I was watching a documentary, and I'm not sure how accurate it is, but it was a documentary on the men who built America. It talked about Rockefeller and the court case with Standard Oil. And in the court case, they talked about how he bribed politicians. And when they talked about that, in that case, they were making Rockefeller the villain for doing that. And when I heard that, I was like, why is he able to do that? Why are we in a situation where the politician has enough power to where if he can be bribed, where if that politician is bribed, he could make a law that would be able to bias the entire industry and market in the favor of this one guy, of the guy who bribed him? To me, that's too much power for politicians. So I think there's an issue there. And yeah, I'm kind of going off on a lot of things, and I don't want to go too in depth with this because there's many more rabbit holes related to this topic at hand. I just wanted to kind of get some initial thoughts because this has been going through my mind left and right all over the place at every which turn. So I want to get some of this out there, share some of it with you. I'm going to keep refining these thoughts and come back to you guys with more that we can go over. Anyhow, I hope that this conversation proved interesting for you guys. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you didn't, you know what to do. And leave a comment below. I really appreciate it. If you're on my YouTube or watching this anywhere else, I would love it if you subscribed. If not, that's fine. And be sure to check out my social media links down below. I've got everything from Twitter, Minds, MeWe, and I have my website, commutationconstruct.locals.com. I call it my website. It's technically also a social media, but that's where you can typically find me. And I do hope to be able to continue this discussion, explore these ideas, and really evolve the conversation. I think that's a good way to put it, and I really appreciate the time you've taken to listen to all this. Anyhow, I'm James Darian. I'll see you guys later.